In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 27. Andrew and Jerry catch up. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers. Hey, Andrew Langer, welcome back.
Know, it's funny. I was using my radio voice.
Your radio voice, yes, indeed.
Yes, my radio voice. While we were in Vegas, anyway. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a few weeks, Gerald, and that's why I wanted to. We have a lot to catch. We have a lot to catch up on, and you're gonna want to stay tuned to. I'm assuming we're gonna go for the full almost 90 minutes today. Depending on, I don't know what Jerry's schedule is, but I'm going to be here talking for 90 minutes, even if he is not. I'm going to talk about my trip to Freedom Fest. My going. Where Jerry and I are going to have a discussion of my trip to the soccer stadium on Sunday. All sorts of fun things to talk about here, but we're also going to talk about issues. And I want to start here, Jerry.
I know, because everyone's tuning in to hear about the soccer game.
Well, no. Listen, I do think there are a certain number of people who tune in for the stuff, right? There are folks who want to hear our takes on politics and policy, and then there are other folks who want to hear us talk about, Jerry being aghast that I went to the district to watch a soccer game with my family, but also
drove like 16 hours, 600 miles.
Also want to hear about my almost getting killed on
yes.
295 in DC.
Well, we're going to do a whole bit on road rage.
Yes, we have to talk about road rage. Maybe that should have been the name of the episode. Andrew and Jerry get road rage.
Well,
anyway,
I'm like Dr. Banner. I'm always
you're
angry.
Always angry. Yes, that's true. That's how you keep it in check. It's not bongos and yeah. So I want to start here. First of all, I want to talk about Twitter for a second, Jerry, because
I'm all Twitter. It's down almost 300 million. This quarter.
Is it down?
Yes.
It wasn't down for me a few minutes ago, so that's good to know. Did it just go back down?
No, I don't mean down like it's not operating. I mean the stock market.
Oh, well, that makes sense because
yes.
and one's going to wonder what happened. All I know is that once again, my spigot of reach has been turned off. Now that Elon Musk is out, now that there's the lawsuit, Elon Musk isn't in charge. My ability to reach my viewers is not.
And my view on this.
I do understand you. I know your view on this.
I think it's all in your head.
Okay. All I know is I tweeted out about Christy Brinkley the other day. I should pull up the tweet in a second. I tweeted out about Christy Brinkley pontificating on nuclear power. And again, normally something like that would have gotten 1,000 views at least, right? 65 views when last I looked at it, 65 views. So listen, again, it may very well all be in my head, but I all I know is before Musk, there was X. After Musk, there was Y, and now and then after Musk, now there's Z. Now we're back to X here. But one of the things that annoys me,
you just sound like Joe Biden, by the way. It was X, and then it was Y, and now we're back to YZ.
Now more Kamala Harris, to be honest.
Do you have cancer as well? And
we're going here because we're going here. Something.
You realize?
Hold on, this is a perfect segue. Because so I tweeted out this morning. I woke up this morning with the thought, where is the breathless media coverage about Joe Biden not following his own mask protocols, not following his own handshake protocols? Here's Joe Biden. Here's Joe Biden shaking hands and talking closely with this member of the Israeli parliament. Here is Joe Biden doing this. Here's Joe Biden doing something else. Because, remember, Jerry, when Donald Trump got COVID in 2020, it was, again, another massive scandal. Oh, how many people did Donald Trump meet with and infect? And yet there's been nothing. And when I tweet out about this, once again, I am going to pull it up. But go ahead. You wanted to make a point here.
Well, I mean, my point is 2 points. Number one, every time Joe Biden goes somewhere, right, he goes to the Naval Academy, and all of a sudden he was recruited for football. Yeah, he goes to a manufacturing firm that makes big 18-wheel trucks.
And
all of a sudden, he's a truck driver.
He was a trucker.
The other day, he's out talking about the environment, and he's now a cancer survivor.
Yes.
The guy just makes up stories. I was asked about this, and I said, look, you have this combination happening. You have a man who for his entire life just made things up.
Yeah.
And now he's suffering from some kind of dementia episode, some diminished capacity. And so you combine the two, and you get statements like, yeah, I was going to be the quarterback at Navy, but Roger Staubach beat me out.
Yes.
I mean, this is just insanity. That's number one. Number two, in terms of his COVID diagnosis, again, I can't believe that the New York Times, Washington Post, and the major media are allowing his White House spokesperson to simply say, oh, it doesn't matter how he got it or where he got it.
Right.
In Montgomery County in Maryland, we're still under a regime of contact tracing. And when my kids were in school, we had to fill out forms. And if God forbid someone had COVID, there was contact tracing going on. And so the president, who is the most insulated person in the world, protected, and his people, his doctor, his spokesperson, those around him have no idea and won't share where he got or might have picked up COVID. It's again, it's hierarchy.
Well,
they live by one set of rules, and they force us to live by another. And
this is why I'm now sharing. For those of you who are listening, I'm sharing this tweet from Greg Price earlier today. When Trump tested positive for COVID, the New York Times and Washington Post dedicated entire investigative pieces to tracking Trump's every move prior to being infected. Will they do the same for Biden? And you know, so he puts out a picture from the Washington Post tracking the White House coronavirus outbreak. And from the New York Times, sorry, that was the Washington Post. That was the New York Times. The Washington Post, 7 days following Trump's coronavirus trail.
Six reporters on the one side, on the New York Times
that's
side,
a good point.
And two reporters. I mean, this is eight from two newspapers, 8 reporters commenting. And remember, this isn't reporting. This was commentary. This was editorialized.
So I get this in response. And this is part of what I bring up is that, you know, I went and debated this professor from UMBC, Tom Schaller, ad nauseum about the Kennedy versus Bremerton decision. That's the religious freedom decision, Jerry. And he tweets back at me, they should, but apples and oranges. There were no vaccines in autumn 2020 when Trump was potentially infecting, among others, Amy Coney Barrett and her family. Biden at that same time was masking. Trump was not. So the situations are far from equivalent. This is the point, right? In the end, yeah, Trump wasn't masking. And you know something, yeah, people got coronavirus. Guess what? Joe Biden literally was promising that if you got vaccinated, you would not spread the coronavirus. You would not get the coronavirus. And yet here he is. And he was supposed to be masking, and he was supposed to be social distancing, and he didn't. And here he is getting
missing COVID. We're missing the forest for the trees.
Which is, and I know you're going to get to this. Yes.
Well, I hate when you predict what I want to say, and I don't say it, and I'm always
no, you're fine. You're going to say it. I know you're going to say it.
But the fact of the matter is that, what I'm going to say is that the rest of us are still under these protocols, and the president ought to be. There's still contact tracing going on.
Yes.
There are still regimes in California and Maryland and places around the country where there are these COVID regimes. And again, we have the vaccine. We have therapeutics now. Then why is it that the Gavin Newsoms, the Joe Bidens, and others can break protocols, their own protocols, but moms and dads living real lives, dealing with the inflation and high energy costs and everything else, we have to go through these protocols.
Right. I mean, Jerry, so the issue of all of these National Guardsmen who are not getting their pay, who are not getting I don't even know if you and I had a chance to talk about this on the air, who are not getting pay, who are not able to serve. They are, because they didn't get vaccinated. They didn't meet the June 30, July 1 mandate out there.
Right.
And so it is an issue of all right for thee, but not all right for me. The other part of this is, where is the admission that the mandate that the vaccines simply don't do what Joe Biden promised them to do?
Well, it's worse than that. We're getting reports now from, again, mainstream scientific journals, and other kinds of testing and other kinds of research where the vaccine might be dangerous to certain populations.
All right, Joe, watch out what you say there, Jerry, because I don't want to get us to be.
But
I'm only joking. Go ahead and say what you want.
I mean, just recently we heard news that in Germany, 1 in 5,000 recipients of the vaccine has had very serious health impact.
Yeah.
Now, again, you extrapolate the numbers to the U.S. I mean, you do the math, is 340 million. We're talking about well over 100,000 Americans could have very serious negative health consequences from taking the vaccine. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
We politicized COVID.
Yes.
And as a result of that, no one trusts public health officials any longer. And this president is still feeding into that public distrust. The White House spokesperson should have said yesterday, you know what? We haven't released the contact tracing yet, but I'm going to get back to you. We're going to answer that question. Instead, she simply says, well, this isn't important. What's more important? No, don't tell me what's important. When you've told me to live my life a certain way for 2.5 years, I'm sorry. I expect the elites to at least give a nod to
this is and here's the reality, right? Is that, and because this also gets into what her stock answer has been on the various Hunter Biden revelations. This is not important. We're not going to talk about this. And again, it's like, don't tell the press. The press knows what's important, or they should know what's important. And if a member of the press is asking a question, they're not doing it because they want to have fun. They're doing it because they think that the issue is important. Peter Doocy.
And they're reluctantly doing it with Biden.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes. But and of course they feel now that they can do it. We'll get to that in a minute, sort of, because you and I haven't sort of fleshed this out really. I want to shift gears because, talking about this admission about the vaccines gets into a bigger issue. And something that I thought about, and I'm going to have to write an op-ed about this. Again, talking about admissions and talking about the choices that this administration makes. You go back to this trip to the Middle East, especially to Saudi Arabia. The trip to Saudi Arabia to beg for more oil is emblematic of the deeper problem, right? Which is, so Team Biden has done. Joe Biden did promised two things when he was president of the United States, right? Number one was that he was going to consider Saudi Arabia to be, I'm like holding up my finger and you can't see it. Number one was going to be to consider Saudi Arabia a pariah state. Number two was to end the use of fossil fuels and to transition us into green energy. Those are two things that he promised on the campaign trail. And he
also promised to bring back decency and normalcy.
Okay,
and my goodness, did he blow that up?
But set that aside for a second. I want to talk about this in terms of choices and truth and ownership. So, we saw our energy sector just go crazy, and we saw gas prices spike to massive, literally unprecedented levels, and Americans are seriously hurting. And Joe Biden.
Side note on that.
Yeah.
So this morning I wake up to all my snarky liberal friends retweeting Pete Buttigieg saying, "Happy Friday, gas prices are coming down." And again, how disconnected they are from the reality of the rest of us. When the gas by me, Andrew, is for 87, it's $4.59.
Yes.
I'm sorry. That's a ridiculous high price for gas.
This is my point, right? This is my point. That yes, and the liberal snark sort of gets into this. And yes, Joe Biden had to go and beg the Saudis. And let's be really clear about this. The Saudis aren't necessarily releasing their own gas, right? The Saudis are also getting millions of barrels of oil from Russia. So in essence, because gas is fungible on a global marketplace, we are essentially getting Russian gas, which means we are adjacently, we are funding the Russian war machine. But set that aside. So Joe Biden is faced with two choices, right? He either sticks to his guns about Saudi Arabia being a pariah state, or he goes and he goes back on his promise, in which what he has to do is sell out the American people, because the bigger issue, the more important thing for him on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and progressive needs, The green energy god is the god at the summit. He can't sell out their green energy god, so he sells out the American people and goes to kowtow to the Saudis. That's the tale here. They cannot admit that they're going to admit that they were wrong, essentially, right, without admitting it, because they haven't gone and admitted that they were wrong to call Saudi Arabia a pariah. But when Joe Biden goes and fist bumps the crown prince, that pretty much says that, right, Jerry, that they admit that they were wrong to call him a pariah. So instead of sticking to their guns there and putting America first, they're going to show that we're weak and that Biden is a weak man and go and hold out our beggar's cup to get their oil. And then they're going to take a victory lap because it's going to slightly bring down the prices. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, a couple of things, right? Number one, he got zero agreement, so he went and he humiliated himself. He got no agreement.
But okay, they got no public agreement, and that was probably part of the pre-negotiation, right? They've been pre-negotiating this trip since February, and so behind the scenes, the Saudis probably said, but then and they know, the Saudis know, if the guy shows up, that's an admission that he was wrong. That's an admission that we're not really a pariah state, despite what he said. And we're not going to make him publicly beg for his oil, but we're going to give him the oil because,
well, that remains to be seen, right? We have no idea about Saudi output.
Yes.
So number one, my point is, at least on the look,
it's a bad deal. Don't get me wrong.
Listen, I understand what you're saying here. You're saying that it was pre-negotiated. He goes there, they release the oil, prices come down before the midterms, Biden wins. The problem is that on the face of things, he went there and begged and fist bumped the crown prince,
right,
who ordered the assassination of a Washington Post reporter, and on its face, he got zero for it. Now, whether or not they increase production or release more energy, we'll see if that happens. But the fact of the matter is, as of this date, as of right now, he bent over forwards and got nothing for it.
Well, and this is my point, is that a different president, and I'm not going to say that president's name, a different president wouldn't have had to have gone and made this beggar trip. A different president would have made the choice of, you know something, I was wrong. We're wrong about green energy. In fact, I want to pull up this statistic, Jerry. This is
while you're doing that, just remind our listeners that the fact of the matter is, we have enough energy under the ground in America to sustain us for the next 1,000 years, and probably beyond that. This idea that we have to go to Saudi Arabia or anywhere else for energy is nonsense. I just saw something recently about how there is this this area in western Texas on the border of New Mexico that we know there's enough energy under the ground there that one little tiny area could fuel America for the next 200 years.
You know something, and I will tell you something. I'm going to say this. I'm going to get into the weeds for a second. I want everybody to go and look up a scientist named Thomas Gold. And Thomas Gold ascribed to a theory that our oil is not, in fact, a fossil fuel. That it's
I've talked about this on the Jerry Rogers show.
There you go.
And in fact, because at one point, again, there was a global flood or there was a regional flood, and because of the greenery and and fossilize, what happens is this energy sources are under the earth.
Yes.
come up through the earth
and
get the fossilized material.
They pick up the particulate matter.
Exactly right.
And by evidence, you point to the fact that we know that these hydrocarbon fuels, methane, etc., exist on other planets that never had life on them. So the fact is that they can exist elsewhere. And more to the point, Thomas Gold essentially said, because these processes are continuing all the time, we will not run out of oil. So anyway, I pulled this up on the screen here. This is a statement about how much fuel energy we used yesterday in megawatt hours, how much electricity, and where that electricity came from. And we used 116,255 megawatt hours yesterday. And coal accounted for just under half of that. Coal and natural gas accounted for about 2/3 of it. And you go through the list here, and here's again my point in all of this, and it gets to what Jerry was saying. The president should have just admitted this is wrong. What we're doing is wrong. We recognize that what we're doing is harming people. We can be energy independent and energy dominant, but the fact is that in the end, they are so beholden to this green energy god that they are willing to sell us out for it. And this is not fiction. It is not fantasy. We have the capacity. Oh, and then I want to get into this other part of it, Jerry, which is, if you are, I don't want to take away from the point. We'll get to the Christy Brinkley issue later on. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, again, this is the biggest hoax in our nation's history. This idea that climate change, look, NASA,
okay, now I will go ahead.
NASA about 2 weeks ago released a study that again, I tweeted out, I talked about it on the Jerry Rogers show, about how the spikes in heat that we're experiencing, it's not climate change, it's not warming, it's not because of air pollution, it's because of the rotation of the Earth and its orbit and sun activity. What's happening in terms of, and again, what's happening in terms of, Europe going through this heat spell? It's natural. It's called weather, and more scientists need to speak up. But more importantly, the left pushes climate change because they want to control every other aspect of the economy.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's the bottom line.
And it's, listen, I can go down the road. I urge you all, if you're going to also look up Thomas Gold, look up a Russian scientist named Milankovitch, Milankovitch. And Milankovitch, a century ago, real quick, Jerry, the Earth's orbit is not circular. Earth orbits in an ellipse around the sun.
Right.
And that ellipse pushes us further away from the sun or closer to the sun, over the course of many, many thousands of years. Also, our orbital tilt, this is great that I can do this on video instead of just the radio, Jerry. Our orbital tilt changes. So the aspect of how much we face the sun changes over time. And it goes in cycles like a spinning top. You ever watch a spinning top? The wobble changes.
Right. And solar activity changes over time.
That's right. So if the sun burns more brightly and you are closer to the sun and the wobble changes your aspect, the Earth is hotter. And if you are further away from the sun and the Earth and the sun is burning less brightly, then the Earth is cooler and you get cooler climatic cycles. But again, the human portion of climate change is very tiny, and yet we want to see this massive overshaping of the economy. And the reason is because that they want, it's all about control. And real quick to sort of point this out, because I did point this out yesterday or the other day. So one of the things I've said on the air over the last couple of days is, if you are someone who is talking about climate and you are concerned, if you think that climate is an existential crisis, so I won't go into this right now. If you think that climate is an existential crisis and you are not pushing for nuclear power, increased nuclear power, then you are not serious about climate being an existential crisis. And so, because we know that nuclear power can be done safely, it can generate prodigious amounts of power. It doesn't release CO2 when you create the energy. Yeah, you have to burn fossil fuels to build the nuclear power plants. But over time, it doesn't. And so for folks who are talking about green energy without nuclear, those are folks who are dealing with this as a political issue, not an existential issue. I'm sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
Well, and again, it's fantasy. There is no green energy hope. We are not there. We don't have the capacity to capture solar energy in a way that will power our businesses and our homes and the rest of it. We don't have the capacity to capture wind. The technology is not there. That's why it bothers me so much when Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation,
yes,
gets on all these programs and talks about how the high gas prices are good because people will buy electric cars.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, electric cars depend upon fossil fuels.
Right.
And again, our old friend Sam Kasman, general counsel at the Competitive Enterprise Institute would do these short films or snippets, and he did one once, Andrew, where they asked people on the street, what's better, burning coal or using electricity, and everyone said, well, of course, electricity, not making the connection whatsoever. Absolutely. That electricity comes from burning coal.
It's a variation on the old question: which weighs more, a pound of feathers or a pound of bricks?
Yes,
but say this is what I'm sharing right now. So this came on over the weekend. This is in the New York Times, or I should say, Christy Brinkley putting this out on social media. Christy Brinkley, remember supermodel Christy Brinkley, Jerry? You might know her as
Uptown girl.
You might know her as that great nuclear energy expert and world-renowned physicist.
Now, wait, before you go on though, it's not to say you don't have to be an expert in a field to have an informed opinion.
Okay, that is true, and you're taking,
because you and I'm not a climate scientist.
But we are at least well informed on policy people. Christy Brinkley is an actress and supermodel who's known for either being on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue or being Gail Gergich on Parks and Recreation on NBC.
Or Vacation.
Yes, she's known for that, or being Billy Joel's wife and the girl in the Uptown Girl.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
But the point is that the New York Times is publishing a letter to the editor from her. Nuclear energy is not worth the risks, which, by the way, the nuclear power plant she's concerned about is just outside of Malibu. And I'm convinced that either she has property there or she has friends who have property there, which is a whole NIMBY issue.
Right.
But why the New York Times, the gray lady, is lending credence by pushing her letter to the editor in this, it just astounds me. That we're here, and this is what passes for journalism.
Well, because Andrew, you know this, and I know this. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that they want to make it so it's too expensive for us to heat our homes in the winter, cool our homes in the summer. They want to make it more expensive for us to travel outside of a certain radius. This is why they want us to live in metropolitan areas with public transportation, because they don't want us to travel. Look. Historical perspective here. They will travel regardless. They will have the wealth to do what they want, regardless of the high prices. They will be able to. This is like Downton Abbey. They will have their estates regardless of the cost, and we will live as serfs. But the bottom line is that this is about control, and I lost my train of thought. Which
no. We're talking about nuclear power. It's about control. It's about getting families to move into cities. It's about into high-rise apartments, getting on the government schedule.
And this is the push for
smaller families.
A former colleague of yours, a colleague of mine at WBAL News, tweeted out day before yesterday, how in Maryland, Governor Paris Glendening. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. I couldn't remember his last name. Paris Glendening had this transit system, this subway system, train system for Baltimore. And she said, what a wonderful thing this could have been. No, I don't agree. I don't think you should take money from me to build a public transit system that I'll never use.
Well, I'd rather have that they'll never use.
Well, yes, they'll never use.
I mean, let's be really clear about this, right? Besides the fact that it costs 5 times as much per mile of rail than it does, and that's just surface rail. I don't know about subway rail and how much more expensive that is, right? It reminds me, Jerry, of a problem that the Institute for Justice dealt with years ago, which was, New York was able to build the infrastructure, the bare bones infrastructure of their subway system at a time when labor was cheap and it was easy to do, and they really didn't give a crap about safety standards.
It was a bunch of Irish guys.
Yes, digging Irish holes. Guys who would work cheap digging holes under the city. Now you can't do it because of unions and those piddling little safety rules. The point is, New York City has the greatest subway system in the world. And I say this, I've been on the Metro. I've never been on.
New York City has the greatest subway system in the world.
I've been on the Russian Metro. The Moscow Metro, never been on the London Tube or the Paris Metro, whatever. The point is, even the New York City subway system doesn't get everywhere where you need to go, and you have more people riding buses because there's a culture there, but then the buses don't get everywhere. And so people were talking about using these things called jitneys, where a private guy in a van would drive into these neighborhoods and take people. He would go the last mile for these transportation systems.
Right.
It would be cheaper, right? On balance, given what we know about ridership, for Baltimore to get rid of their bike lanes and build more roads and build more road capacity and get people cars or get people vouchers for using Uber and get them out and doing these things. But again, it's because they want, now some people want the shiny object, right? There has been this great love affair in some urban centers and among suburban planners with light rail. Baltimore has a light rail system. I've seen it, and I've seen it empty.
That no one uses.
That no one uses.
Literally no one uses. And the thing is, too, is all of these elites who want, again, your money to pay, they don't take these systems.
That's right. Of course not.
Back to, I found my train of thought.
Good.
And again, back to Sam Casman.
No pun intended.
And what he said when he was at CEI, still at CEI.
Jerry found his light rail of thought.
So in Great Britain, people were horrified. The aristocracy was horrified at the idea of the railroad.
Yes,
because it would allow the riffraff, it would allow the common folk to come to the country. They were horrified at it.
Yes, of course.
And we're living through this again, where the elites in this country, the American aristocracy, so to speak, the Joe Bidens and the Senator Kerrys and the Pete Buttigieg's and all the rest of them, they are horrified that we want to get in our car and take our family to the beach. They're horrified that we want to get in our car and drive and visit Grammy and Grandpa. And again, you don't believe me, read their own words.
Yes.
Remember when AOC and Senator Markey from Massachusetts made the mistake of releasing summaries of the Green New Deal?
Yeah.
So the Green New Deal was this thing in theory, and then they released it. Yeah. And we read it.
Yes.
Do you know that in the Green New Deal, the one currently that all you Democrats support, there's an office at the FAA where you would have to get permission through a social crediting system. If you lived in New York and you want to visit Disney World or Disneyland, you would have to apply for a permit.
Wow.
And then that permit would be weighed against your carbon footprint.
Sure.
This is the Green New Deal. They don't want you to travel outside a certain radius. They don't want you to travel. And think about that. Think about that in terms of economic freedom. Think about living. You're living in Baltimore. You're living in West Baltimore, and you are someone who wants out. And you've studied hard, even though your schools are failing, and you get into a college on a scholarship, even though you have no money and no parents, and you go through school, and you find that you have a knack for knowledge and science, and then you get a job in the Boston suburbs or in the Chicago suburbs or wherever, and you're told you can't work there because it's too far out of your home area. This is like the Hunger Games. Yeah, we're all going to be assigned zones, and to leave the zone, we will need permission from the government to leave.
Let's remember. I mean, and we've talked about this before. One of the great equalizers in American society, frankly, global society, one of the great liberating factors in global society was the ability of individual Americans to purchase automobiles.
Mobility.
What was that?
Mobility is one of the greatest mechanisms for freedom.
But also, Jerry, I mean, and we've talked about this particular aspect of it. If it hadn't been for the private ownership of automobiles, the civil rights movement down in the South would never have worked. Right? You can't have a bus boycott if you don't have an alternative to the buses.
Exactly right. And again, it should tell hardworking immigrants and moderate Democrats that the party they're aligned to literally wants to keep them in the ghetto.
Right. Yes.
I mean, that's not hyperbole. This is the truth.
Well, and if you think about it, right, not that we spend a lot of time talking about Baltimore on this show, that's why it's always laughable when Ryan Dorsey, the city councilman in Baltimore, is talking about more bike lanes. Let's shut down the streets and build more bike lanes, because all I know is when I'm coming out of my, my let's say even just my regular 8-hour Joe job somewhere, I've been slinging not there's anything wrong with slinging burgers or working on a factory line or doing whatever, but it is hard work, right? It is hard work. I come out of cleaning an office building at 3 a.m. and Ryan Dorsey
Get on your bike.
Get on my bike and pedal home, right? That or wait on some unsafe street somewhere at a bus corner where some squeegee guy is going to come over and try to shake me down.
Or again, I drive through Baltimore on a weekly basis. And I told this to Erica, the beautiful Erica, the wife, that every time there is something outrageous that I witness.
Yeah.
Some crazed person at a bus stop, some squeegee panhandlers surrounding cars and hitting cars, folks wilding along the inner harbor. My point is that they want us to be on public transportation or on bikes, even as they refuse to enforce the law to make the streets and the public transit systems safer.
But by the way, I want to digress for a moment, Jerry, because you raised the issue of the squeegee panhandlers, and I don't know if you saw, because you and we went through. By the way, as we're catching up here, we went through the longest I haven't talked to Jerry was like, it was over, after I got back from, or while I was in Vegas and after I got back, I didn't talk to Jerry for like 5 days. And I texted Jerry because there is this new verbiage that's been put out by folks at YPR and other stations, the Baltimore NPR station, that they're no longer calling squeegee guys. They're now calling them squeegee workers. And this sparked a big discussion at around the dinner table one night that I was in Vegas for Freedom Fest. By the way, that is a humble brag. Jerry, are you aware that I was at Freedom Fest in Vegas?
Oh yeah, I was.
There you go. So someone said, well, why don't you refer to them as squeegex, like Latinx?
Yes.
Yeah,
squeegex.
That should be the preferred. Just call them squeegex.
What we did on the Jerry Rogers show.
And that's, by the way, that's not SQUEEJECTX, which your JECTX.
No, it's Squeegee X.
Yeah, Squeegee X. But it does sound like Squeegex, like it rhymes with reject.
What we did was, because you told me this, I took my own turn at it, and I did a whole show called Squeegee Nation.
Yes,
and I said this. I said in Baltimore City, Squeegee Nation is the most powerful interest group in the city and therefore the state, more powerful than teacher unions. Remember, the mayor of Baltimore has been very clear that he will not clear the corners. He's made it very clear that these young people are there to put food on the table.
Yes,
and all the rest. He refuses to enforce the law. And again, we don't have to belabor this, but here's the bottom line: is this going to your road rage discussion? The fact is that you're at a street light, and it could be any number of traffic lights in Baltimore City, and you're with your daughter. And you are surrounded by 6, 7, 10, 12 of these squeegee workers.
Right.
And you don't have, I don't know about you, I don't even carry cash with me any longer.
That's right.
And so I have no cash. I'm like, no, thank you. And they start to berate you. They start to threaten to do horrible acts to your daughter. They take their squeegee weapons and they hit your tail lights or they hit your windshield. What am I supposed to do?
This is not.
See, I'm supposed to drive through.
It is essentially,
and then all the damage to my car,
like the modern version of highway robbery, right? Which is, they show up and
it's highway robbery.
Yeah, highwaymen, the squeegee highwaymen, which makes them sound much more romantic than it is, because it's funny because this is not. I would say your parents, but we are our parents here. This is not our childhood squeegee people. Right. I remember distinctly driving with a friend of mine out of Manhattan. Right. And I want you to picture this. You come up Madison Avenue. And Jerry, do you remember the it's still there, the Madison Avenue Bridge? It's just south of Yankee Stadium. So you come off the Madison Avenue Bridge and you hang the left turn to get on the Major Deegan and go past the stadium. And there were always squeegee guys there. And a buddy of mine had a can of change. And he was driving and he goes, okay, get me out some change. I'm like, no. Tell him no. Tell him you don't want to know. I don't want to do that. I don't want a confrontation. Now, today, right, it would have been, Andrew, give me the change. I don't want my car to get beaten up. At the time, no, you didn't really have to worry about that. All you had to worry about was a guy squirting urine on your car and then using a newspaper to wipe it off.
That's what it was, by the way, back in the day. It was they used newspapers.
Yeah,
but here's the thing.
And P.
The number one sign that New York City had lost the battle in terms of crime and chaos and lawlessness was the squeegee menace.
Yes.
And thus the number one sign that New York was making its comeback, the great New York Renaissance, urban Renaissance, was when the squeegee menace was gone. And again, I don't understand big city mayors who are so myopic, so dogmatic, that they can't understand how unfair, how unjust it is to put hardworking citizens in a situation where they feel terrified on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It again, it is all about control. By the way, folks, I was trying to pull up here. There's a really great, speaking about New York, we'll get to it in a second. I'll pull it up.
But you and I, Andrew, talked about also in cities like Baltimore, not just Baltimore, but cities like Baltimore, the mayor and council and the government depends upon these speed cameras and these red light cameras.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, if you've driven through a city like Baltimore, you know that no one obeys the traffic laws.
Yes.
Except for me. I mean, I'm the only idiot because I don't want to get a ticket. But what happens when you're driving down a single lane road in Baltimore and there's
some guys on your butt
and there's a 35 or 30 mile per hour speed camera, and you're going the limit, and this guy's behind you getting irate because he doesn't care. The car's not insured. Maybe he stole the car. And the thing is that you have you're putting law-abiding citizens in jeopardy by following the law, by stopping at a red light instead of going through it. You put yourself at risk with the squeegee menace. When you're driving down the street with the speed cameras or red light cameras and you're following the law, you put yourself in jeopardy because there are others who don't care about the law who are trying to get by you. I was at a stoplight in Baltimore recently, and this happens all the time. And I was at the stoplight, parked cars, and then a green section here, one lane. Yeah. And there's a guy behind me going bonkers, cursing me out, giving me the finger. This is at 10:30 in the morning on a Sunday.
Sure. Yeah.
And I have a choice, right? Stay there, go through the red light, or if I stay there, he might come out of the car. So I'm literally in my car looking around. What do I have in case this guy comes at me?
Absolutely.
Right. And know what this guy did? He turned onto the sidewalk. He found the spot where, I guess he squeezed through some parked cars, went on the sidewalk, stopped to give me the finger again, and then made a right-hand turn.
And the reason why Jerry brings this up, and
this happens every week.
Yeah. So for me, I was driving into the district for the soccer game, the DC United versus Bayern, because my wife is a huge. Because
everyone knows what Bayern
is.
Byron?
Yeah, Byron. Bayern München or Bayern Munich is the
I've been to Munich, by the way. It's a beautiful city.
It's the Munich football club. And they are usually at the tops of the German soccer league, the Bundesliga, and their players are among the best in the world, if not the best in the world. And my wife is a huge fan of this football club. So for her birthday, we got tickets to the Bayern game. And we're going in, and it's a Wednesday. We have to get there at the game kickoff or whatever it is was at 7:30. So you want to get there with plenty of time to go in and have fun. And so we're driving up, and we came in because we're coming in from Virginia. We came up 295, which is a great road. Yeah. It used to be part of the way I came into the district before. It's a road that connects the DC Beltway in the south with Route 50, and it runs in the Baltimore-Washington Parkway. So it's actually the road that goes all the way north to Baltimore from there.
Right.
And it is notorious again for speed cameras, right? I have been dinged because you're either speeding off of the Beltway at 70 plus miles an hour and getting on this road, or you are accelerating to 70 plus miles an hour to get on it. So either way, they are known to have not just one, but several speed cameras along this route. So I am doing the speed limit because, as Jerry points out, these are not cheap speed cameras. If you get dinged, sorry, go ahead.
Look, my daughter, Bridget, was in DC, and there's a double light where you go through a light, and then there's an immediate other light as you make a left.
Sure.
And she went through the green light. And as she was going through the second light, it turned red, and she got a $140 ticket.
Yeah, there you go. And there are a couple of these places where DC has mid-block red lights, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like you go up 18th Street and at L, there's a mid-block red light camera there. So the point is that we're going, and I am, moving with traffic. I am driving next to somebody. I'm not going to speed up and pass them because, again, I don't want to get a ticket. And some guy comes up right behind me. And he's right on my bumper. As Jerry had said, I could sit on the hood of his car and put my feet on the bumper of my car. And it would have been, it was that close. So I tap my brake a little, give him a little brake check to get him to back off. This makes him angry. And I'm not proud that I probably exacerbated the situation. But then he comes up again on my bumper. So,
but what are you supposed to do? I'm sorry.
That's exactly it.
What else? I mean, give the guy a warning. He's right up. God forbid. What if you sneezed and accidentally hit the brake? Or what if you saw something in the road and had to brake?
And had to go, and I couldn't move anywhere because I had a car next to me. So finally, I do get around. I decided to get around the car that's next to me. This guy comes in and swerves right in, does that quick lane change so that he can make sure he gets right in front of me. And not only does he hit his brake, he slows down to almost a complete stop, again, on a highway where we're doing 50 miles an hour and he's doing more. And then he speeds up again and he does it again. Because what he wanted to do was he wanted somebody to plow into my rear and he would speed off. That's what he wanted. And we wound up actually calling it in. But, it's one of those situations where, again,
but calling it in is useless because the police don't even enforce low-level street crime standards any longer.
Let me be really clear. It is not a useless thing to call in a reckless driver on a major interstate to get the state police involved, because invariably they will have cars stationed and they will be on the lookout. And I've seen people I have called in about get pulled over.
Now, again, but let me again, because I'm cynical this morning, and that is we know that in the Maryland, Baltimore area, you have politicians who are telling state police, don't make traffic stops. Yes. They're literally saying, don't make the traffic stop because it puts because of the racial issues and all the rest of it. I mean,
But I will tell you, if you drive anywhere near the bridges and tunnels in Maryland, those MDTA police, those Maryland Transportation Authority police, they will give you a ticket if you're going, because that they make huge amounts.
But there is this big push, especially in Annapolis. There's legislation to make it more difficult for police to pull over cars. So here's the irony with that too. It just shows you.
I'm moving back to Maryland, Jerry.
But
start speeding again.
The trickle down civics here, right?
Yeah.
So you put in different criteria for state police or police to pull over cars. And again, they don't want you pulling over someone for a expired tag or for these type of reasons, right? Just let the car go. And this is because there have been incidents where you pull over a car for expired tag. Turns out they have a warrant. The person pulls a gun or a weapon, he gets shot, and then all of a sudden it's a cop kills a black youth or a black male, right?
The story is a cop pulls over or cop shoots someone over an expired tag.
Right, exactly right. And so there's a big push now to end this. But here's the problem. At the same time, cities like Chicago and Baltimore have guns, illegal guns being shipped into the cities.
Sure.
How do they get there? What's the number one drug gun running highway in America? It's 95.
It's I-95, yeah.
Right. And so you have politicians who are lamenting the gun violence and at the same time saying, well, you can't pull over cars. And that's how you get illegal guns off the street.
I got to tell you something. If I'm a gun runner or I'm a drug smuggler from Florida driving up to New York, I mean, I know it's a long drive. I've driven that drive many, many times. I know it's a long drive. And I know I-95 is 2 lanes in either direction through most southern states, as you do, Jerry, because you go down to South Carolina just about every year. I would make it a point, if I've got massive amounts of illegal stuff in my car, to make sure that I have a car, right? It's like Mr. Wolf. like Winston Wolfe. Like you make sure the taillight's not out. Nobody has expired tags.
Yes, yeah, but
drive the speed limit.
But here's the thing: we're making it easier.
Yes,
right.
Oh, I understand.
Post Ferguson, post George Floyd, we're making it easier for these cartels and for these gangs and these criminal enterprises to do their job. And then the politician will get up. Just 2 days ago, Joe Biden tweeted out how these poor victims were they were the victims of gun violence. No, they're the victims of criminals.
Yes.
Again, it's almost as if it just drives me the insanity of all of this.
Stop the insanity.
You want to get rid of illegal guns, but you take away the tools in the police officer's tool belt to get rid of guns.
Yeah.
Observe, question, stop, right? Frisk. Yeah. We've taken that out of the tool belt. How do you think we get illegal guns off the street? Low-level crimes in New York City. When you jumping the turnstile in the subways was everyone did it. And then Bratton came in and said no more. And you know what happened? They took thousands and thousands of guns off the street because they were enforcing low-level crimes. And you have big cities now like Chicago. In Chicago, you're not allowed to chase down a culprit. It's illegal in Chicago. It's illegal in Chicago to chase after a suspect.
Amazing to me. Right. And we saw what happened with Chesa Boudin and getting, at least San Francisco had finally had enough there. What I love is this story from earlier this week. So you had Eric Adams during the campaign, the mayor of New York City, talking about immigrants and illegal immigrants and how New York City loves them. And earlier this week, Mayor Adams saying, much in the same way that Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, said, wait a minute here. You can't come and dump illegal immigrants in our city. It's a huge problem for us. And that's again why these things matter and why this kind of creativity matters.
And Eric Adams, his hubris, right? He's like the governor of Arizona, the governor of Texas. You're cowards for saying, well, you're the one who wants a sanctuary city.
Yes.
So we're going to send them to you.
Yes.
Now, again, this is it. Force a progressive to live by their own rules. And they quickly want to opt out.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it gets into the thesis as Jerry put out there. It
Hierarchy.
Only works for them so long as they can be above the requirements, the mandates of society. I had missed this, and I want to come back to this, Jerry, because you raised it. I missed the fact that we knew that this was going to happen, that folks like AOC were going to start to call for a Chinese style social crediting system. But that should be an alarm for everybody. And you and I think need to write something about that issue.
She's of course, the poor thing was arrested, put into Wonder Woman type handcuffs. Apparently they're invisible.
Yes.
Again, look, AOC laments about the why are you complaining, Brett Kavanaugh, that you can't have dinner at a Morton's? Oh, poor you. Protesting is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. Then she's coming up the stairs of the U.S. Capitol, and now, mind you, I don't agree with his humor, but there was a conservative comedian protesting, making fun of her. Making comments about her rear end and this sort of thing, which I wouldn't do. But regardless, it was catcalling. It was beneath the words of a gentleman. But he's a comedian, and do you know she went bonkers because the police wouldn't arrest him? And again, by her own standard, right? She felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But by her own standard, that's the purpose of free speech and protesting.
Right.
But when it's done to her, she wants this person arrested. And then she came out later and did this whole speech against the Capitol Police and how they let people in on January 6th. I think AOC, by the way, should be a witness to the January 6th committee, because apparently she has evidence that the police let everybody in.
That's right. And by the way, for those of you who are listening instead of watching, I've put up a GIF of it could be AOC lifting her fist in salute. It's really Judd Nelson from the Breakfast Club lifting his fist in salute at the end of the movie. let's actually turn our attention there for a minute, Jerry, because there's something that obviously there's a lot that bothered me about last night's hearing. It's still not over, this January 6th hearing. And by the way, it's not going to be over until just before the midterms. The last January 6th hearing, if it's not as soon as early voting begins, it will be sometime while early voting is taking place, if not right before
and
the
here's
November 2020 election.
And again, I'll bottom line this. We know from the committee members that they will not bring in witnesses to corroborate the testimony of previous witnesses.
Right.
We know that they are selective, not only selective in calling the witnesses, but selective in terms of releasing videotaped testimony.
Yeah, they're not releasing any of the raw testimony. It's all redacted and edited.
We know also that they've raised these crazy charges of congressmen giving reconnaissance tours.
Right.
Only for it to be in the ether now. What happened to that? There was this list of congressmen who wanted pardons, pre-pardons, right, from the president. But again, that was dropped, and we haven't heard anything about that. And then now not last night, but last time, they accused all these members of Congress and the vice president of colluding and plotting in December for the overthrow of the government. Of course, Andy Harris, congressman from Maryland, was named there, and I had Congressman Harris.
We never
on my
had a
program.
chance to talk about that, you and me. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the thing is that this is, look, I know hearings are not trials. I get that, but the fact of the matter is, this is the most un-American display of a show trial, of a show hearing in our nation's history. This is not about fact finding. This is about, like last night, Josh Hawley. Who cares? So he gave a fist to the protesters because he agreed with their reason for protesting.
Yes,
and then he was told to evacuate, and so he kind of scoots out, and all of a sudden now he's a. Like that was okay. There's nothing substantive there.
I want to focus on something from last night, and I want to talk about why is it so important that they are trying to pin Donald Trump as an insurrectionist on Donald Trump. Why are they trying to pin him as an insurrectionist? Right, setting aside what the legal definition of insurrectionist might be, they are going to, if Donald Trump runs, and it's looking increasingly likely that he is going to run, what they want to do is use the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says that if you engaged in an insurrection against the United States, you can't hold office. You can't run for president, essentially.
But yet Jamie Raskin is still a member of Congress.
But time out for a second. I mean, set that aside for a minute, because I want to get into there are two aspects of this I want to tie together. This is why they're doing this. So just so you understand, it's because of the 14th Amendment and what it says. If they can tar Donald Trump with the brush of being an insurrectionist and succeed in getting him knocked off the ballot, which they won't do, but what they want to do is they want to get him knocked off the ballot in at least one state, then they will have succeeded in what they're doing here, which, by the way, is short-sighted, because they think that I guess they're at least admitting that Donald Trump is the strongest candidate to run against Biden or any one of the other midgets that's going to be running. I'm sorry, little people that's going to be running. But here's the thing about last night that I came back to this morning, Jerry, which is they're claiming, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are claiming that Donald Trump is responsible. He led this insurrection, right? That's what they're saying? Yeah. He's the leader of this insurrection. He is the reason for it. Yeah. So tell me, Jerry, what kind of a leader, as the insurrection is happening, if he is in fact leading this insurrection, what kind of leader is actually leading the insurrection when he doesn't make a single phone call for 3+ hours while the insurrection is going on? Like, that was the most revelatory fact that was released last night, is that they said, okay, Donald Trump was off on his own. He didn't have anybody with him, and he didn't make a single phone call for 3 hours while this was going on. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm leading an insurrection, Jerry, I'm on the phone with people. I'm saying, okay, go here, go there. I'm out there. I'm actually, I don't know, leading the insurrection, right? Unless they're saying that.
But of course, listen. Yeah. But of course, who was president January 6, 2000?
Donald Trump.
2020. Yeah. Donald Trump.
Yes.
Here's the thing: he was leading an insurrection against who? Because the Congress
No, Jerry, you're missing my.
I get your point.
I'm not admitting the point is that their entire house of cards falls apart because, and obviously it falls apart because he's leading an insurrection against himself. But even if he is, let's assume for a moment that it isn't an insurrection. Let's assume for a moment that Donald Trump is actively trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. He doesn't talk to anybody. If he coordinated this and caused this to happen. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, again, we've talked about this before, and that is for insurrection to go forward, a coup, an insurrection.
Yeah.
You need military support, political support.
Right.
You need public information. You need the media, and none of that. He did not have. There was no conspiracy. There was no army. There was no insurrection. This again, and even the testimony. If you could put aside your prejudices, this is just about Donald Trump being Donald Trump.
It's funny because the committee missed a big point here, right? If I'm really weaving a conspiracy theory, and I'm really trying, and I want to prove that Donald Trump was really trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, I would be shouting to the high heavens that Donald Trump had called for the National Guard to be in DC on January 6th. That he was trying to get the military invested in this process. But instead they are ignoring it because it points to the fact that, because Donald Trump says that he wants there to make sure that things are peaceful on that day.
The one thing that we don't know, and I fear we'll never know, there's so many issues that we never find the answers to because it would put progressives in a bad spot. But we don't know, like, what was Nancy Pelosi's role in all of this?
Yeah.
I can't help but think that almost like a rope-a-dope.
Yeah.
This is kind of like Muhammad Ali against George Foreman, where you just you bob, you weave, you go against the ropes, you tire at your opponent, and all of a sudden you knock them out. I think, in a sense, they rope-a-doped Trump here.
Yeah.
They wanted, what happened is exactly what they wanted to happen.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And I wonder, like, why we never heard from the head of the Capitol Police.
Right.
He was never interviewed.
But
Nancy Pelosi never interviewed. And again, on this.
But also, Jerry, if I'm holding primetime hearings, I'm going to bring up the organizers of this event, several of which you and I know. Put them in the uncomfortable hot seat instead of these, essentially these idiots. This woman last night who was who is now the communications person for the Republican staff on the Green Energy Committee, or whatever the hell it is that she does. Right. And even the National Security Advisor, who I'm not going to say is an idiot, or national security, whatever he is. But again, these people that nobody knows and nobody cares about, if you're going to have it done in prime time, you bring out your star witnesses, your hostile witnesses, right? Let's put Amy Kramer on the stand. Not that I want to put Amy Kramer, and Amy Kramer is a friend, but you want to see how defiant these opposition people were. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a different take on this than you. You can't keep Donald Trump off any ballots unless he is charged and convicted.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that they're going to be able to do it, Jerry. I'm saying they're going to be able to try. And if they try in every state, there is a 2% chance that they're going to be victorious somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
What I think this is more sinister. I think, frankly, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump in a sense. Donald Trump was always a proxy for the kind of hard hat working class American.
Yeah.
And I think what this is about future voter suppression. I think this is about future voter intimidation and also fraud.
Yeah.
I think they're setting it up now that anyone who would dare say there's a problem with this election, no, this is against the law, you're going to be tarred and feathered with the J6. What was it? The Scarlet Letter. This is the new Scarlet. This is the new Scarlet Letter.
I mean, it gets back to what you and I have long talked about, which is the issue of, if you want to know what the Democrats are doing, just look at what they're accusing Republicans of. Right. Look, so this is about, they are trying to kill democracy.
There's a piece today at National Review, and I think it's outrageous. It's Ted Olson, of course, and a series of former federal judges, conservatives, and they make this claim that there was no fraud in the 2020 election that would have caused the overturn of the election. Like, there's always the caveat, right?
Yes.
But here's the problem with their analysis, and we've talked about this. This is not about suitcases of ballots not being counted, although that might have happened.
Yeah.
This is about the fortification of the election prior to election day.
Right.
And how big media, big tech, big business, the U.S. Chamber, the Democratic Party colluded to make sure that Donald Trump lost the election. And we have evidence of that.
Well, but more to the point.
Wait, just real quick. Wisconsin.
That's where I was going with this. Yes.
They have Wisconsin that broke their own laws, illegal mail-in ballots. And then, of course, Pennsylvania is the big issue, where they literally broke the state's constitution by changing the election laws without amending the Constitution.
And let's be really clear about Wisconsin, right? So the Wisconsin Supreme Court rules that the change in election laws were illegal.
Yes.
And that the mail-in ballot process was illegal. So that essentially could have potentially invalidated 100,000 ballots in a state that Joe Biden only won by 20,000 votes. Now, we don't know how many of those ballots are fraudulent, or if any of them. But to say that there's no evidence of fraud,
well, that's the problem.
That's the problem.
And which goes to my theory,
yes,
that this has nothing to do per se about Donald Trump, and has everything to do with again, how dare you working class Americans think that you should have a say in trade policy, in domestic policy, in foreign policy. You see, Trump, look, you and I have criticized him.
I want to come back to this insurrection. Go ahead.
Donald Trump, we've criticized him. The problem with Donald Trump is Donald Trump. Yes. What he should have done is he got screwed. The 2020 election, Trump was screwed, period. Yes. And however, what he should have done was taken it like a man. And he should have said, I was screwed, but I'm coming back in 2024 to get you.
I'm gonna quote Jerry Rogers to Jerry Rogers. You know, we live in an era now we have all of the norms, and the Democrats have broken all of the norms. And you have said, and I agree with you, that we need to push back whenever we can, and we must push back. And so the problem, of course, is, you're right. According to tradition, and traditions of civility in the United States, you lose the presidency. But again, if we're fighting for the very essence of the republic, so but I get
but here's what he could have done.
I agree with you as well.
But this is what he could have done. He could have conceded, and then spent unlike other presidents, not go into the background, spend the next 2 years, right, all of 2020, 2021, 2022, talking about the fraud, talking about the Pennsylvania, talking about Wisconsin. His problem was he allowed his ego and his anger. He became emotional.
Yeah, I mean,
he was more Jim Kirk. He should have been more. He was more Bones and Kirk. And what we needed was Mr. Spock.
Yeah, or Captain.
And again, the bottom line is he ruined it for himself. Donald Trump will never be president ever again. And I disagree with you. He does not run.
I don't know. Listen, I don't think he runs, but I think it's the chances seem to be getting better. And this is my point in all this, is we talk about them trying to keep him off the ballot, right? Because they will try, and they may very well succeed in some place like New York or California or both. And this gets into their strategy for getting rid of the Electoral College. What they forget is that that strategy only works in a system in which the presidency is decided by popular vote, right? Donald Trump is already going to lose, any Republican is going to lose California and New York. They're not going to keep him off the ballot in Florida. They're not going to,
but here's the thing too, and I always push back. Look, the Electoral College, number one, to amend it or to rid ourselves of it, it has to be done by constitutional amendment, number one. Yeah. So you can't legislate this. Number two, it'd be insanity to get rid of it, because we would have the.
This is my point, Jerry. Is that their entire strategy for trying to keep Donald Trump off the ballot in a handful of states doesn't work, because the only states where it would work are states that Donald Trump isn't going to win.
I understand that, but here's what they don't consider, and not in this context, but just broadly, the Republicans could roll the numbers up in states like New York and California. They won't win those states.
Yeah.
What happens is that because of the Electoral College, Republicans are strategic and they spend their money in states like Texas and Florida, states where they can win. Yes. And so they put zero money, zero effort, zero structure, no infrastructure whatsoever in New York and California. If all of a sudden we got to a point where they did amend the Constitution and they got rid of the Electoral College, Republicans would put great amounts of money in parts of California that are red.
Our good friend Saul Anuzis, our former friend Michael Steele, they've talked about this. But my point is, setting all of this aside, and this is my point in the end. If the Democrats were to succeed in getting Donald Trump taken off the ballot in 2024 in California and New York, this would be the act that would embolden Republicans to come out in droves to support him.
And the thing is,
and independents as well.
They couldn't knock him off the ballot. They would have to prevent him from the ballot. But then again, how could they do that? Because you would have to, if he's prevented from being on the ballot in New York, this would be a legal decision.
Yes.
Right.
So what would happen is that they would petition the state board of elections and say, under the 14th Amendment, Donald Trump, he led an insurrection, therefore under the 14th Amendment, he is prohibited from being on the electoral ballot. And then what would happen is it would then go through the courts, and eventually it would go to the Supreme Court.
Right. And Trump would be put back on the ballot.
And Trump would be put back on the ballot. And that's part, and then they would use that as part of this. The question is, how much time would
There's also a question of the 14th Amendment, and would it apply at all to this circumstance? Because when not the founders, but when the Congress wrote that amendment, they had a very specific idea on what insurrection, how it's defined.
My point is, we're if we're going to get into the weeds here, right? It doesn't matter. We know what the courts would decide, right? We know what would happen. Let's assume for a moment. So we know that the California State Board of Elections would say, oh yeah, hey, he engaged in insurrection. Then it would be challenged, and the District Court of California would agree because they're left, and then the Ninth Circuit would go. If they would. I don't know if they would challenge it in federal or state court. Either way, at all of the state level or the lower level federal courts, they would affirm what the State Board of Elections did, and then it would go to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not what any of this means. Donald Trump wasn't found guilty in a court of law. You're idiots. Enough for this. Donald Trump's on the ballot. So we know how, again, it's not about substance. It's about kabuki theater.
You know what?
Yeah.
You're brilliant. Let me tell you something real quick. This is why this all matters. And this is a big misread by the Democrats. So up until 2012, give me a minute here.
Yep, that's fine.
Up until 2012, both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, understood that you would win presidential elections by winning the Senate.
Yes.
By winning the swing voter. And then 2012 happened, and Barack Obama won re-election, but for the first time in over a century, a incumbent president won re-election with fewer votes than initially elected him.
Yes.
And when you look at all the data shows that Barack Obama lost the middle.
Yeah.
He did not win swing voters. But what they were successful in doing in 2012 because of his infrastructure. His campaign infrastructure was state of the art. They were able to drive up the progressive base to such a point that they were able to win the election.
Yeah.
And so thereafter, Democrats now believe that you win elections not by courting the middle, but by generating your base. This January 6th committee is all about generating the base. They believe, but here's the problem with that. Donald Trump's 2016 election nullifies that theory.
Yes.
Because all of those centrist voters, voters that didn't vote in prior elections came out to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And so they're still operating.
Much to Jerry's surprise, by the way.
Yes. So the Democrats are still operating on this. We have to generate the base, which is why abortion, guns, insurrection is all they're talking about. Right. But they're in for a rude awakening in 2022. And then again, depending upon the candidate in 2024, the Democrats are misreading the electorate, just like this false notion that demographics is destiny.
Right.
Again, second generation Hispanic immigrants are business owners. And when property taxes and licensing and regulations and energy taxes and energy costs, when all of inflation, when all of this is crushing them, they might disagree with Republicans on certain issues, but when it comes down to the pocketbook and kitchen cabinet issues, kitchen table issues, they're going to vote for the GOP. Now, I don't think they're going to be a permanent. I think Hispanic voters will be for the next generation anyway, will be the quintessential swing vote. Yeah. But Democrats never anticipated that.
Right. Yeah. And no, I agree wholeheartedly with this. Let's tie this back in. I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about, we don't spend a lot of time talking about Maryland politics, but I do want to spend some time. You haven't been on since the primary happened, right? You haven't been on this week at all, right?
No, but man, you think I went after the squeegee guys on a Sunday. Wait until you see the proverbial baseball bat I'm bringing to hit over the political head of Larry Hogan. Yeah, Larry Hogan has proven himself to be a man of low morals, low standards, zero character. This guy is. I'm sorry.
You think it's character as opposed to ineptitude?
No. Okay. Larry Hogan is the carbon copy of Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
Oh, I see.
It's all about ego. It's all about narcissism. It's all about hierarchy and his kind of wealth. Larry Hogan is leaving the state of Maryland with zero legacy, nothing. He's accomplished nothing.
Yeah.
No lasting reform. No bench. His protege was crushed in the Republican primary. The individual he endorsed in the most watched state's attorney's race in the nation, maybe in Baltimore City, his candidate came in third.
Yeah.
And legislatively, he's accomplished nothing.
I don't know. I think the only candidate for Congress he endorsed did not do well. Right. Also lost that in Maryland's 6th congressional district. Here's
Foldy. He introduced Foldy. By the way, Matthew Foldy is a good guy.
No. Listen, I want to be you. Matthew Foldy's a good guy. We're friendly with Tharu Vignaraja. You've worked with him. I've worked with him. And I will say this: Kelly Schulz is an old friend of mine. I've known Kelly Schulz for many, many years.
But Kelly Schulz tried to do the Hogan two-step, and that is don't engage in ideas, don't engage your opponent, try to keep the happy face. Look, Larry Hogan will leave the governorship with a 65% approval rating, and he never spent any of it. Well, all of that capital he never spent. He didn't even spend it on Kelly Schulz.
That's the thing that gets me is that he didn't spend it on Kelly Schulz. And again, it was a primary, so. But time out for a second, because I want to go back to something, which is, Republicans never really understood why Republicans win in Maryland statewide, for offices like the governor. And they, Bob Ehrlich was a great governor. Bob Ehrlich was a great guy. I love talking to Bob. I think Bob has a brilliant political mind. But let's face facts. The reason why Bob Ehrlich won in 2002 is that he went up against
Kathleen
Kennedy Townsend, who was a complete boob. That's probably not the best way to put it. A complete
not ready for prime time.
Not ready for prime time as a statewide candidate, and he trounced her. Then he runs against Martin O'Malley twice, and Martin O'Malley, who is a competent Maryland politician,
and you know, notwithstanding his persona today, Martin O'Malley had the reputation of being a moderate Democrat.
Yeah.
In fact, the Manhattan Institute had praised him, and so he had the bona fides, so to speak, of being a tough on crime, moderate Democrat, ethnic Democrat. Right? He was in his Irish band.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense as to why he would.
So then Larry Hogan runs against first Anthony Brown, another incompetent Maryland Democrat. And then the Democrats put up Ben Jealous, who weirdly enough was even more incompetent campaigning than Anthony Brown was. And so, yes, Larry Hogan built a statewide organization. Larry Hogan created, he stick to his message, you know, but Larry Hogan had to run a perfect campaign, both in 2008 and 2014 and 2018, so that he would be able to overcome the built-in obstacles here. And the problem, of course, with Kelly Schulz is, and we're going to go into this, is that she was not reading what was happening on the ground, looking at the numbers and realizing that she had to run a different campaign than Larry Hogan did. The electorate was in a very different place than they were.
I'll say, just as a reminder, I am a registered Republican in the state of Maryland.
Yes.
I have voted in every single primary, every single school board election, every single general election since I've been here. We have not missed one, my wife and I. We got zero literature from Kelly Schulz.
Interesting.
Not a phone. Now, I understand that the Democratic Governors Association was involved in the race, and I'm sure some of the mail I got in favor of, or not in favor of, but just some Dan Cox mail, I'm sure was generated from the left. But the bottom line is, though, I was contacted by his campaign numerous occasions, mostly with robocalls and with a flyer, at least one, maybe two. Yeah. So again, if I'm a busy person and I'm dealing with coaching my kids and paying taxes and getting this done and that done, and I'm not paying attention, right? Because who's covering? Sure. I mean, look, you watched. I'm in the DMV,
and by the way, it
wasn't even covered.
By the way, let's also remember that they pushed the primary into the middle of summer, which people are paying even less attention.
So again, if I'm just a busy person not paying attention, I'm in the DMV, and so therefore it's not covered on when I turn the 6 o'clock news on. It's DC news. It's not It's not Baltimore news.
Sure.
And so therefore, how would I even know Kelly Schulz was running?
Yeah, and that's just it, right? I mean, it was a lot of stuff on talk radio, both on WBAL, WCBM, and WMAL that I was on.
I'm a host. I'm a host of
I don't want to say this. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Kelly Schulz campaign never contacted. I'm the most conservative host at WBAL. Her campaign not one time contacted me.
See, and that's interesting to me because I know, so she did.
And she's been on my show before.
She's done at least one interview on WCBM. That did not go well. But
later, she did it later.
Yeah. And then, she did it later. I mean, you're right. There should have been a steady din. She should have been doing
She should have been on WCBM 10 times.
Yes.
Over the course of 10 months.
On 10 times. I mean, so my point is, it's that there was a real lack of understanding or some kind of a disconnect between the kind of campaign she was running and what was happening on the ground, right? You look at Malaya Cromer's numbers out of Goucher College and the bulk of Maryland Republicans, right? Remember, as you said, Jerry, empirically, statewide, Larry Hogan has a 65% approval rating. But among Maryland Republican voters, 70% of Maryland Republican voters think the state's on the wrong track. And so it was incumbent upon Kelly Schulz as an incumbent but as running as a Larry Hogan cabinet member to try to thread that needle between Larry Hogan and the 70% of Maryland Republicans who think they're on the wrong track, who think the state's on the wrong track.
Right. But Andrew,
this is what gets me about, folks who are pro Schulz people who are now, again, screaming in anger that Kelly Schulz lost and are threatening to leave the Republican Party over this. It's like, something, grow the fuck up. Pardon my French, Jerry. Your candidate lost. She's a lovely, brilliant, competent candidate who was badly advised and didn't recognize
and Hogan under her. And Hogan himself, again, showed himself to be a person of low character, saying that this crazy man has no business being on the ballot. Never mind, the voters put him on the ballot.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, number one. So again, that kind of elitist attitude.
So what happens, right, is that in the end, this then becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, our person didn't win in the primary, therefore I'm not going to vote for this person in the general election, and I'm going to come away and say that my point was proved because this guy didn't win the general. He didn't do better in the general election. Well, something, guess what? You're right. If you don't vote for the guy and you're a Republican, and by the way, you're a Republican Party official, you're running for Central Committee, and you're not going to vote for the Republican candidate, listen, I think it's incredibly telling when someone runs as a as a Maryland Republican Party official, and then because the primary doesn't go their way with their candidate, they're leaving the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think it's, again, low character.
Yeah.
So and the bottom line is this,
right? Sorry, go ahead.
Look, Dan Cox, who did win the primary, has a built-in base of about 30% in the state. We know this, but the idiot Hogan staffers, just idiots, meaning they need custodial care. They need someone to wipe their ass for them. That's how stupid they are. One of them, I think it was his communications director, said something like, Donald Trump got 33% of the vote in Maryland. And what's Cox think? He's going to get more than that in an off-year election? Yes.
Yeah.
In an off-year election, absolutely. Because there is no top of the ticket. Because right or wrong, I mean, if there was ever a year with the inflation numbers and the Democratic,
that's exactly it, right?
This would be the year where Dan Cox type could squeak something out.
That Dan Cox believes that the election were fraudulent. Let's assume for a moment that he believes in all of these other things. Substance matters and policy matters. This is the thing that gets me, because these are the same folks. I'm going to curse again, who took a big giant shit all over Donald Trump, right, while he was president. Larry Hogan's a prime example of this. Big old
Larry
shit
Hogan,
on Donald Trump.
Larry Hogan was the cudgel.
When gas prices were low, when they had the highest level of employment in essentially in the nation's history, when we had a regulatory state that was being kept at bay, all of those really good things, but we voted against him, or we wouldn't vote for him, or we carped about him going into 2020 because of the mean tweets. And here's where we are now. So these same people are going to essentially cede all of the electoral ground, right? I'm not saying that they're going to go and vote for Wes Moore, but if they're going to stay at home and allow Wes Moore to become elected and allow Maryland to have, once again, a Democratic governor, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate, and we know what those bodies are going to do, right, then they're essentially ceding the entire state's governance, regardless of how Dan Cox might run, right? Because we know that Dan Cox is going to run on a pro-parent education platform. He's going to run on a pro, conservative economics platform. And something, you're right. He's probably not going to compromise with the legislature. But what he will do is he will veto a bunch of bad stuff and force the Democrats to have to fight.
And he's already talked about this.
Yeah.
So I don't want to bore our out of Maryland listeners, but this is important. How can a Republican governor in a blue state, how can he wheel and deal and get things done? Something that Larry Hogan failed to do. What you do is you hold back monies.
Yes.
So I was on WBAL, and Marty from Parksville called in.
Yep.
And he was saying that the one thing Larry Hogan never did that he should have done was like previous governors, like Schaefer, and other governors, when he didn't get what he wanted, when the legislature would not compromise with him, he would hold back funds.
Yeah.
And then it forced the Democrat. It forced it was Democrats and Democrats. This said it forced his opponents to the negotiation table.
Sure.
Do you realize that Larry Hogan's been governor for 8 years? He never once even used this.
Right.
He could have. He could have gotten reform. He could have gotten compromises, but he never wanted to sacrifice his popularity.
Right.
Because if you hold back fundings on programs that are popular, well, then you could take a ding for that.
And let me just say one more thing about this, because we are running short on
And
time.
Dan Cox, by the way, has said he would do that. He would control the purse strings in a way
sort of
that would force
down
Democrats to
the
compromise.
independent voters who are out there, and where Kelly Schulz's big failure was. And again, say this as a friend. Kelly Schulz should have done more to distance herself from the COVID-19 policies of the Hogan administration. She should have said and could have said, listen, I was the cabinet secretary. There are things that I couldn't say that I can say now. We got things wrong. I would have done this differently. And here's what I would do differently as governor. She never articulated that. And that was a problem. And she didn't articulate that at a time when Larry Hogan wasn't doing buckus to help her campaign.
Andrew,
yes.
You're a political observer.
Yeah.
I don't remember her campaigning period up until the last couple or 3 weeks.
I saw she was out there. She was pressing the flesh. She was certainly out there doing things, without a doubt. But I think in the end, she was. Listen, ultimately, the buck stops with her in terms of the decisions that were made in the campaign. But she was very badly advised as the direction of this campaign and how to do this.
If I were Kelly Schulz, I would hold a press conference and I would endorse Dan Cox.
100%. I agree with that.
But she won't. But she won't do it. She won't.
And that's a shame, because you're absolutely correct. There should be this press conference, and she should say, listen, Dan Cox and I disagree on a great many things. But what is important is the state, and we should do this. You're absolutely correct.
But even I keep on going back to this.
But let me
on what issues does Dan Cox and Kelly Schulz disagree?
I don't know. And that's the other part of this, right? Is again Dan Cox may be a little bit more, pro-life than Kelly Schulz is.
Right.
Maybe.
That was, by the way, and I called this at the time, the nail in her coffin. We talked about this weeks and weeks, maybe months ago, where I said that Dan Cox was going to win. But when I knew it for sure was her absolute weak response when asked about the Dobbs decision.
Initially, her initial response was lukewarm.
Was lukewarm. She said that she quote, "I won't lift a finger to change the law in Maryland," unquote. Horrible.
But my point is, she then came around and talked about her own. Later on, she came on and talked about her own narrative with regards to this. But listen, this is my point here, and I want to get back to what you just said about the endorsements. This is part of the problem with Maryland Republicans. Now, I know I've said this before. I used to think that the Maryland Republican Party was the most screwed up Republican Party in the country until I realized that every Republican Party is the most screwed up Republican Party in the country. But a problem and I don't know this about other Republican parties. I was active in the Maryland Republican Party. The problem with Maryland Republicans is that they hold grudges, and those grudges prevent people from coming together after elections, after primaries. And whether it is, and I was guilty of this in terms of what happened to my friend Dick Sassi in the 36. Now, I eventually came around, and I'm a big fan of Steve Hershey. But other areas where people hold grudges, and person A won't talk to person B because of what they've done. And they simply will not come together. This is a huge problem in Maryland. So people who, when their candidate loses, threaten and say, "I'm leaving the Republican Party." Something, okay, fine, leave. But that's the reason why the Republican Party, right? It's like the line from it's like the line from Lawrence of Arabia. That's why they will be a little people, a silly people, nasty, barbarous, and cruel. That's just it. Jerry, listen, we've been at this for an hour and a half, if you can believe it. So, and I know you gotta go. Are you going to go see the Yankees at O's this weekend?
I don't know. We'll see.
I've Eeyore's
to be honest with you, it's almost a matter of principle for me now, where where I think the best secret sauce to solve Baltimore's problems is for everyone who doesn't have to be in Baltimore or never go to Baltimore.
Sure.
When I look, folks who are listening, Baltimore City, and I've lived in the Bronx. I have done work in Newark and Camden. I worked regularly in Trenton, some of the worst cities in the country. I have been in and out of Chicago. I've been in urban areas around the country. There is no worse than Baltimore City. And what makes it the worst is its political leadership has no. They have ideas,
and again,
but they have no intention on making things better.
Baltimore is bad among equals of equally bad. All of the things that these cities have in common is politicians who are unwilling to solve those problems. I flew through Chicago, by the way, on the way home, Jerry, and I'm still salty that I was denied a Chicago dog. I'm still bummed about this. I think
the Orioles should come and build a stadium next to the Germantown Soccerplex.
Here you go.
And because here's what's going to happen. Mark my words. In another 20 years, Germantown, Maryland, will be more of a metropolis, have more people in it than Baltimore City.
And Jerry says this, and he still can't find his way to Old Town Germantown.
I can't. No. Gaithersburg. Yes.
All right, Jerry, you're on Sunday.
I'm on Sunday. If it's Sunday, it's Jerry on WBAL. It looks like I'll be on next Friday in the afternoon, filling in for Kim Klasick, I think 10 to 2.
When are you going on vacation?
We are going to be away in August.
Same here.
Yeah.
Do you know when? Or we don't need to announce this?
I don't want to tell these people. They might try to break into my house or something.
Yes, of course. Well, we'll talk about this off the air. Jerry and I, we're going to figure out the schedule. We're going to try to get some special shows in the can. And I don't mean in the bathroom. I mean, pre-recorded so that we have content that we can release while we're away. In the meantime, Jerry, what do you want people to do? They have to plant their feet.
Find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm.
Have a great week, everybody. Thank you, Jerry. Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.